You're listening to the Everything Jewish 10 Minutes at a Time podcast, where you'll learn about every Jewish topic imaginable in about 10 minutes. Before we dive in, I need to make a quick confession. My Hebrew pronunciation is shaky at best, and my Russian, well, let's just say if you asked me to read a Moscow street sign, you'd end up in Siberia instead of Red Square. Add to that the fact that my voice isn't even real. It's artificial intelligence, and sometimes it sounds like a GPS that's been programmed by someone's bubby after a long day. So please, forgive me if the word refusnik comes out more like refusnik or refusnik. I promise the content will be clear, even if the accent is not. Okay, now that I've embarrassed myself enough, let's get going. Today's topic is refusniks, those brave Jews in the Soviet Union who wanted the simple right to live freely and practice their faith, but ended up standing at the crossroads of politics, identity, and Cold War drama. So, what exactly is a refusnik? Imagine you really want to download a new app on your phone, but Apple or Android keeps rejecting your request for no good reason, except that they don't like the idea of you leaving their ecosystem. That's basically what it was like for Jews in the Soviet Union who wanted to emigrate to Israel. They'd apply for an exit visa, which was like their official download ticket, and the government would stamp it with a giant niet, meaning no. These rejections weren't random. The Soviet government viewed Jewish emigration as a betrayal, like walking out on the team during the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. But for Jews, staying in the USSR meant living under a system that restricted religion, suppressed Jewish culture, and pretty much treated them like they were on a permanent do not upgrade list. So, when they asked to leave and got rejected, they earned the label Refusniks, and that label became both a burden and a badge of courage. To understand why being a refusnik was such a big deal, you have to picture life in the Soviet Union. Imagine your favorite streaming service, Netflix, Disney+, whatever, suddenly announcing, "We've decided we don't like comedy anymore." All sitcoms are banned. Also, no one can ever watch Seinfeld reruns again. That's what Soviet life was like for Jews. The government shut down Hebrew schools, forbade the printing of Jewish books, and treated Jewish identity like something suspicious. Going to synagogue was risky, like showing up at Comic-Con dressed as Darth Vader and finding out everyone else came as Harry Potter. You'd definitely stick out. Worse, applying for an exit visa often meant losing your job, your apartment, or even being harassed by the KGB. It was as if you told your boss you wanted to move to a new company, and instead of just wishing you luck, they erased your email, repossessed your chair, and told HR to follow you home. Despite the risks, thousands of Jews still applied to leave. Why? Because even with the dangers, the pull of freedom and connection to Jewish life elsewhere was too strong. Israel, in particular, was like the promised land of Wi-Fi after years of dealing with Soviet dial-up. Refusniks weren't just motivated by religion. For some, it was about escaping systemic anti-Semitism. Jews in the USSR were often barred from certain universities or jobs, like a cruel game of Monopoly, where every time you landed on Boardwalk, the banker said, "Sorry, not for your kind." For others, it was about reclaiming Jewish identity after decades of suppression. Think of it as finally deciding to order your bagel with lox, even though for years, everyone around you insisted you only eat plain bread. The desire to reconnect with community, tradition, and Israel was so strong that people risked everything to apply for those exit visas, even knowing refusal was likely. The refusnik movement wasn't just about paperwork. It turned into a global human rights issue. Imagine if Taylor Swift's tour got banned in one country, and suddenly Swifties around the world organized marches, petitions, and concerts to fight for it. That's what happened with refusniks. Their plight gained attention across Europe, Israel, and especially the United States. Jewish activists abroad held rallies, pressured governments, and shouted, "Let my people go," borrowing straight from the Passover story of Moses confronting Pharaoh. It was the 1970s and 80s equivalent of going viral, except instead of TikTok dances, it was passionate speeches and letters to senators. Even American presidents got involved, raising the issue with Soviet leaders. This international spotlight embarrassed the USSR, which wanted to look powerful, but instead looked like the cranky hall monitor who wouldn't let kids go to the bathroom.
From unsolved mysteries to unexplained phenomena, from comedy gold to relationship fails, Amazon Music's got the most ad-free top podcasts, included with Prime. Because the only thing that should interrupt your listening is, well, nothing. Download the Amazon Music app today.
With its 2 juicy beef patties and 3 slices of melted cheese topped with tangy Big Arch sauce, the Big Arch is what happens when you start making a McDonald's burger and never stop. The Big Arch, the most McDonald's burger yet, for a limited time.
The more the world watched, the harder it became for the Soviets to keep refusniks locked in place. Some refusniks became famous symbols of resistance. The most well-known is Natan Sharansky. Picture him as the Marvel superhero of the refusnik movement, except without the cape, though, honestly, he deserved one. Sharansky applied to emigrate, was refused, and then spent 9 years in Soviet prisons and labor camps. His crime? Basically, wanting to live as a free Jew in Israel. Instead of being broken, he used his imprisonment to inspire others, becoming a global icon of courage. When he was finally released in 1986, it was like watching a long-awaited season finale, where the hero finally beats the villain. His story, and those of others like Ida Noodle and Yosef Begun, personalized the movement. These weren't just faceless applications. They were real people with families, dreams, and incredible resilience. Their courage kept the issue alive, reminding the world that freedom isn't just about Netflix subscriptions and Wi-Fi speed. It's about the right to live openly as who you are. The struggle of the refusniks also reshaped Jewish identity in the West. Jews in America and Europe saw their own reflections in these Soviet brothers and sisters. Supporting them became a unifying cause, kind of like how everyone in the 1990s united around knowing the lyrics to Friends' theme song. Synagogues held rallies, college students wore free Soviet Jewry buttons, and grassroots groups popped up everywhere. Even people who weren't especially religious found common ground in the fight for Soviet Jews. It gave diaspora Jews a way to express solidarity, activism, and pride. Plus, it reawakened the idea of Jewish peoplehood, that no matter where you live, your story is connected to Jews worldwide. Supporting refusniks became a cultural touchstone, like knowing how to argue about bagel quality or which deli makes the best pastrami. In this way, the refusnik story didn't just change Soviet lives. It reinvigorated Jewish identity for millions across the globe. Eventually, cracks began to form in the Soviet system. Think of it like a frozen lake in spring. The ice looked solid, but underneath, things were shifting. By the late 1980s, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev introduced reforms like glasnost and perestroika, restructuring. These weren't about Jews specifically, but they loosened the overall grip of the government. Combined with international pressure, it became harder for the Soviets to justify keeping Jews from leaving. Suddenly, the Nyet stamps started turning into Da stamps. From the late 1980s into the 1990s, waves of Jews were finally allowed to emigrate, mostly to Israel and the United States. Imagine a long-awaited software update finally fixing the glitch that locked you out of half your apps. For many families, decades of waiting ended in reunions, resettlements, and the bittersweet joy of freedom mixed with the scars of years of rejection. The fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 was the final crack, and with it, the gates opened wider than ever. Looking back, the Refuseniks movement is more than just a footnote in Jewish history. It's a lesson in perseverance, courage, and the power of community. It showed that even in a massive system like the Soviet Union, individuals could make noise loud enough to echo around the world. It also reminded Jews everywhere that identity is worth fighting for, whether it's saying Kaddish in a hidden apartment, teaching Hebrew in secret, or writing letters from prison that inspire millions abroad. And it's a reminder that freedom isn't free. It often comes with struggle, sacrifice, and a lot of waiting in bureaucratic lines. If you've ever had to wait 6 hours at the DMV, multiply that frustration by about 1 million. Add some KGB surveillance, and you'll get a tiny taste of the refusnik experience. Their story remains inspiring today, not just for Jews, but for anyone who's ever fought to live authentically in the face of oppressive systems. And that wraps up our episode on refusniks. Thank you for sticking with me through the history, the humor, and the sometimes wobbly Russian and Hebrew words. The Refusniks story may be heavy, but it's also deeply inspiring, reminding us that courage and stubbornness, two very Jewish qualities, can change the world. If you enjoyed this episode, please forward it to a friend who might like it. Or even better, leave a positive review so others can find this podcast and join our journey through Jewish history, culture, and identity. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and maybe appreciate how easy it is to get a passport today compared to the Soviet Union in 1975. Thanks for listening.